Breaking Language Barriers, i18n Strategies for Developers. Please welcome Kevin Wright. Over to you, Kevin.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming in online and for my session here. Today, we're going to be talking about i18 dynamic language translation on your websites and applications. A little bit about me. My name is Kevin Wright. I'm originally from Stuttgart in Germany. I've lived here in Orange County since the late 60s. Live here with my wife and my little dog. Orange County is about 50 miles south of LA, if anybody's wondering where that is. In addition to programming, I'm really into travel photography and since the pandemic, organic gardening. I started out as a Visual Basic programmer doing server client software back in the 90s. I started with Cold Fusion with Macromedia 4.5 in 99. Currently, I'm a senior developer with Western National Group. We are a property management company that we own and we manage large apartment buildings. And then I also do consulting with my own company, Kinetic Interactive. And I'm trying to spin up the Adobe CF user group here in Orange County. Again, we've had some issues. I did a big relaunch in 2020 of the first week of February, and the very next week is when the pandemic hit, and had to shut everything down. So I'm trying to spin that up again. If anybody lives in the Orange County area, or if you're visiting, we're going to be trying to meet every third Wednesday of the month. So let me start by sharing an experience I had. I've traveled to Korea last year, the first time in March. And my wife and I usually just, even on international trips, we pack very light in a small carry-on. So we don't have to check in at the counter. We don't have to wait for the luggage and all that. So when I checked in, usually I fly with a couple other airlines, Asiana or Korean Air, but we tried a new airline called Air Premia, and they had an online check-in. So I went in, and it's asking me for my passport and all that, and birth dates and things like that. It took me about 45 minutes and 3 tries to get everything correct. Because of the date issues, the dates in Korea, they put the year first and then the month and the day, but there was no hint. Even though I selected English as the language, even though I put in my passport as a...
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Right now, what we see is the Virgin Mobile page. Is that what you're sharing?
No, hang on a second. You don't, okay. Hang on a second here.
Yeah.
There we go. Do you see the agenda PowerPoint now?
Yes, we can see
Okay,
that.
I apologize. I was, instead of sharing the entire screen, I was just sharing the tab. My mistake. Sorry about that.
No.
So, when I put in my passport as US, then they had another question, which was nationality. And by default, even though I had selected English, my passport was US. They had my nationality by default as Korean. And when I submitted everything, it took that. And I realized the mistake. I went back in and tried to redo it, but everything was available to edit except for that field. So now when I get to LAX, um, I have to go to the check-in counter because they say I cannot check in online because my passport doesn't match my nationality and all this. Um, so instead of going directly to the gate and all that like we normally do, I had to wait in line at the check-in counter, and then it took us 45 minutes to get everything straightened out because they had to get a manager over. She had to call the Air Premia uh, tech support or the main offices to get everything changed before I could even get on the flight and go. So this whole experience of not having clear hints and things on the website for a non-Korean speaker in English was very problematic. It didn't give me a good first experience with the airline. Wasted almost an hour and a half just at LAX. It's a good thing that we got there so early. Now, granted, I went back this last October with the same airline, and the check-in was much better. So it's more than just translating language, words of language, but it's all the nuances within your applications and within your website. So what we'll talk about today is exactly what is I18n or internationalization, some of the challenges that we might have, how do we execute it, and then we'll look at a couple example websites, and then we'll talk about best practices. So internationalization, or I18n, it refers to the process of designing and writing your code in the back end to be able to switch dynamically your text strings back and forth between languages. And localization, L10N, is the actual switching of those strings or managing what strings to use. So it's kind of the internationalization is what you do on the back end when you're writing your code for your app. And then localization is adapting to the different languages and cultures that you use. And altogether, both of those, we call it globalization, G11N. So you might be wondering, how do we get these acronyms, G11N, I18N, and L10N? So it comes from the number of letters within the first and the last letter. So it's pretty basic there. So why does internationalization matter? So for your business or for your product, you're going to reach a wider global audience. You can increase revenue and market share. The most important thing is to do it. You must do it correctly to build trust with your customers. That experience that I had with the airline, it didn't give me a good sense in if they're doing their website and things like that. It was kind of sketchy to me. So even some of the translations from Korean to English didn't make quite a lot of sense. I don't think they had a native speaker translating things, so it was a little sketchy. And most important too, it's you can scale pretty well and enable rapid expansion into new markets and new regions if you want to. Technical advantages, scalable from the very start. You don't have to, change a lot of code. All you do is drop in a new, what I call resource bundle. We'll talk about those a little later, what they are. It's easier and cheaper to localize in the future if you if you develop your code with internationalization from the very start. And just like best practices, it would clean separation of your content and your code. So common use cases, we'll look at a couple websites. If you're doing mobile apps, SaaS platforms, especially e-commerce platforms, if you have any kind of shopping carts or anything like that, you got to take into consideration different currencies, different payment gateways. If you're building any kind of apps or games, there's some use case there. And especially government and public services that requires accessibility for international or multi-language speakers. Even here in California, they offer like 10 or 15 different languages on most of the county websites and documents that they provide. There are some downsides and some trade-offs. It's a higher initial cost to develop. It's much more complex. You have a lot of increased testing and Q&A, and takes longer to release changes and things like that in release cycles. And there is a slight performance overhead, not much, but there is. When you're loading your resource bundles, your translation files, and for formatting data. There are some challenges too. Managing, if you're in a larger company, managing the translation workflows and working between your developers, your translators, your QA department. If you have more than a couple locales, maintenance is going to be heavy, and versioning and compatibility issues. The challenges in globalization or internationalization and localization is encoding for different character sets. So you must always use UTF-8. There are some languages, such as Arabic, that reverse and they read from right to left, not left to right, like most Western cultures. Pluralization is different. Calendar systems and dates are different. Numbers, currency formatting, in design and content layout. So if you're flipping from left to right and right to left, your content and design layout needs to change. Even with things like, say you have a button and the English word speed is on it, but German is notoriously difficult because of the string length of different words. So in German, the speed is Geschwindigkeit, but if you're translating that, it doesn't fit into the button. So you need to kind of design with a flexible, expandable layout back and forth. Even with your divs, your buttons, anything where you're translating a word needs to expand and contract according to how long the string is. There's a lot to consider. Even sometimes there are some humorous translations. So Geschwindigkeit is speed in German, but in Swedish is felt. So you're going to see, if you're ever driving in Sweden, you're going to see road signs like this, which is quite humorous to me. There are some other challenges with globalization. Cultural sensitivity to different meanings. So I believe, the thumbs up here in a Western culture is good. But if you're in the Middle East, I believe that's almost like the middle finger. So if you're designing things like, Facebook has the little like button or the little thumbs up, You need to be aware of all those cultural differences and nuances, and make sure your content is appropriate for the culture that you're targeting. There are a lot of legal and regulatory considerations, especially in the EU. And then organizationally, the budget for localization is quite high if you're on a large team and you're developing a large application or website. Again, time to market is going to be longer, and content heavy websites might not be a fit. And we'll talk about that later. I'll show you. So back in 2008, I was hired to with Virgin Mobile. They took over a Korean telecom company, SK Telecom Helio, and I was hired to convert a sub application, a sub website for the Korean market in Korea. So a very heavy content website like this was not a fit for i18 globalization. So it's a completely different website. Separate teams. They had a team for Spanish. They had a team for Korean. A whole separate QA team, development team, everything. So they currently, I believe, Virgin Mobile, they don't have a presence here in the United States, but they have presence in the Middle East, Europe. But they have 90% of their websites are a completely separate website for the different locales, because the content is a little bit different, but it's a super heavy content website. So it's not a good fit. We'll take a look here. Let me. So here we're looking at, this is, I believe, one of the Arabic sites. I think this is Kuwait. It's in English, and you'll notice everything is going from left to right, like most Western cultures. But if we change it to Arabic, you'll see here in a minute. It's kind of slow today. There we go. You see that the whole layout reversed. Now it's going right to left because their language reads right to left. So the whole content and layout switched. We'll go back to English, and you'll see it flip back. So this is being done dynamically with CSS and with a resource bundle. So this is a good example here. So how do we execute and accomplish globalization? We want to externalize all user-facing strings. What that means is we write our code to externally access a resource file, pull in the language string that we want, and dynamically do it when we present the website or the application interface to the user. There are different ways to do it. I've seen it done with a database, which is not really practical. That's probably the slowest, and yeah, that's not the best way to do it. Resource bundles, those are Java resource bundles, and then JSON files. There are a lot of libraries and frameworks out there that make this job very simple and does all the heavy lifting for you. I know in JavaScript, there's i18 Next. That's an open source. It supports almost all JavaScript platforms. There's Format.js. There's one specifically for React and Vue, React International, and Vue i18n. In Java, there's Java resource bundles. You can do it under the hood of Cold Fusion using resource bundles. That's sort of a more complicated way to do it. In Cold Fusion, I'm using ColdBox, and they have a CB i18 module that I just plug in. If anybody's using Order Solutions products, ColdBox, and with the CB i18n module, it makes it drop dead easy. Drop everything in to your resource bundles, and it does all the heavy lifting and everything for you. We'll take a look at some code a little bit later, and I'll show you how easy that is. So there's a naming structure for these resource bundles. So it's usually the language underscore the locale, and if need be, even underscore the variant. So say even for English, you have an English resource bundle, and then you could have a different one for English in the UK, or even in the United States. You could have one EN US, the locale, and a variant. Maybe you want something different for southern states rather than northern states. They call different things, Coke, soda, things like that. They have different areas call things different. So you could even use it for something like that. The structures that we're looking at here, the one on the left is just a straight Java resource bundle. It's a key pair value. I like to use JSON, which is on the right. It's a little bit easier to manage. You can segregate different key pair values within different sections, and we'll look at some of that too in the code later on. So there is sort of a file inheritance. It looks for the properties first. You could have a master, and then you could have maybe an English master, and then you could have a sub one that's English for US and English for UK that builds upon that previous master. And you could even go one more layer that goes to the variant of the locale. So it inherits and builds upon each previous one. It does it automatically in your resource bundles. So a lot of challenges. It's more than just translating strings, especially when we're looking at currencies and dates and things like this. If we look at that date there in orange, it's 1/2/2025. Here in the US, and here in the US, we're going to read that as January 2nd. But if you're in France, they're going to read that as February 1st. And not only the position of those date characters, we need to think about the separator character. So in the US, by default, it's always a slash. Could be, you could format it differently if you want. In Spain, it's the day, then the month, then the year, but they're using a dash. And in Sweden, they're using 4-digit year, then the month, then the day with a dash. Number formats and currencies, that gets really, really tricky. So in the US, 1,000 would be 1 with a comma, with a dot as the separator between the dollar value and the cents value. In German, it's the exact opposite. They use a dot for the separator and then a comma for the separator from the dollars to the cents. In France, they use a space and a comma for the separator between the dollars and the cents. Even things like a currency, the position of the currency sign in German, so 12-3, that's $12.30 or euros. The euro is at the end. But in German for Austria, the euro is in the beginning. The euro character is in the beginning. So even things like that, even though it's the same language, you have two different locales, one for Germany, one for Austria. There are a lot of differences there. So how do we kind of manage all of this stuff? With, you know, it's if you had to code for all this stuff and keep everything in resource bundles, that's a lot of maintenance, a lot of nightmare. But Cold Fusion has some functions that are built in that make life a little bit easier for you to do all this stuff. We have the set locale and get locale, which is what you set your locales into, I want to say cache memory, so it knows what you're talking about. And then it has date formats, time formats, date time formats, currency formats, euro currency formats. You can check if it is a currency, if it is a date, if it is numeric, based on your locale. Remember, I was saying that they're using dots and commas. Parse currency, euro currency. So there's a lot of built-in functions that Cold Fusion gives you that make your life a lot easier to do some of this stuff. Again, we'll talk about some considerations. We talked about expandable and flexible layouts. That's really got to be key. Avoid culture-specific icon. Even the aesthetics of your color scheme, you need to really think about which culture you're targeting, because colors and symbols and imagery has a lot of different meanings in different cultures. So even here in the global attributes within HTML, you can actually, if you're having most of your content in one language, you can actually segregate out a single div or a single paragraph to use a different locale. And you do that within the lang tag, within the attribute itself. Even has a direction attribute where you can say, use these character strings left to right or right to left within a subsection of your application or your web page. There's also a we'll talk about this in a minute. There's also a CSS pseudo class. So in the same way that you can use your global attributes in your div, span, paragraph, whatever, there's a CSS language pseudo class. You have to use the HTML lang attribute, and you can have within your CSS file the lang attribute and then your list of locales, either EN for English, FR for France, and then you can actually set the CSS, whether it be the font, the boldness of the font, the size, the color, all that, everything that's within CSS, you can do with this pseudo class. So based on what locale you specify within that CSS file, or that class that references the CSS file, you can do a lot of things based on what language you're targeting. Oops, I'm going to go back one. So the other thing is for spiders that crawl your website, you don't want to have, this is specifically for websites and not really for applications or games or things like this, but you want to give it your default website and the default language. And here you can say, I'm into organic gardening. So on my side project, I'm building a gardening website, and it's in 2 languages, Korean and English. So by default, my domain is English. And then the alternate, so it says this website is related to this domain, but treated as a separate website. And the language is Korean. And I gave it a subdomain of ko.ocurbangarden.com. So when I'm switching languages, I'm actually switching subdomains, but it's pointed to the same code base. It's pointed to the same hosted website on the server. I'm dynamically changing my language strings, but when Google or whoever is crawling my website, it says, oh, okay, I'm going to treat this Korean version of the website as a separate website. So when Korean people are Googling and English people are Googling, the results are not all mixed in together. They're segregated, and it makes a lot more sense and a lot more, you're going to get a lot more valued traffic that way. So even things like this within your code, you need to kind of consider. We talked about this pseudo class already. So like I said, you can even change the color of your text. Okay, let's look at some code here. So here's this website I've been working on in my spare time for my gardening. And it's in English. Most everything's in English. This is a work in progress. So here, this is another thing too. When not only do we switch language strings, but we want to give the person a hint of, so I have these icons here. So because if we go to Korean, there we go. You'll notice that I switched the subdomain. It's the same website. I'm dynamically changing all my strings for the entire site. But here, even though somebody who doesn't speak Korean, they know, oh, okay, this one's English because it has a little American flag. So how do we do this? Let's look at here. Okay, so here's those global attributes that I was talking about. And all I'm saying is, you know, the path info is all the same, and it's just specifying the different languages. And then my button that we just saw, all I'm doing is sending it to a URL and passing in my language, either English or Korean. Then in my handler, I'm just setting my locale. And here I'm using Coldbox, but I believe that's just using the Cold Fusion set locale in the back end, I believe. And then I'm relocating, I'm setting my locale, and then I'm relocating to the new domain or subdomain. So how do we handle the dynamic string translations? So here in Coldbox, all I did was create the Coldbox site. It's very easy to do if you've ever used Coldbox. Or if you have not, go to the ordersolutions.com website, and there's a very easy documentation on how to get up and running with Coldbox. It's a great MVC platform. Makes your life really, really easy. And then all I do is say get resource, and then this nav menu .categories. Let me show you the resource bundle. That's why I said I like JSON, because it keeps things really organized. So if I say nav menu categories planning, I look here, I have nav menu categories, and then I go planning, and then if I look in my Korean one, nav menu categories planning, and there's my Korean string. So automatically Coldbox with the CB i18n extension or module plugged in, it's doing all this heavy lifting for me. It already knows, because I've named the JSON files in the certain folder where it goes. It does everything automatically for me. So even here in my submission of my contact form, I can even specify error names if they don't fill it out correctly. Even the Google map. So we noticed, let me go back here. Even the Google map, you'll notice that it's in Korean. How do we do that? I mean, we have no control over Google Maps. All I do is send in the locale as the region, and then Google will take care of everything else. So as I switch back and forth, whoops, go back to English. Go back down to my map, it's back in English. So there are a lot of things to kind of think about as you're building your sites or your applications. So let's take a look at a really well done. This is Starlux. It's a Taiwanese airline. When you first come here, right off the bat, it asks you, what language do you want? And it even asks you what temperature do you want, Celsius or Fahrenheit? So I'm going to just say, whoops, Fahrenheit, English. Very nicely, well done. If you play this, it's in English. I don't know if you hear that. We'll come up here and we'll change it to, let's go to Japanese. Really, really well done. And even here, it's the same video, but it's actually in Japanese. I don't know if that sound is coming across, but it's a very, very well done example. Go back, I think they even have Chinese. Everything is like really, really well done. That's the URL. If you want to go take a look at that website, we'll leave that up for just a couple of seconds. Okay. On that note, let's just go over some best practices. If you're thinking about globalization and you're kind of on the fence, maybe not, it would be probably in your best interest to design it from the very beginning with globalization in mind. Yeah, don't treat it as an afterthought because it's really complex and really mind-bending to try to refactor all your code to do globalization. Kind of, if you're even thinking about it in the near future, do it right off the bat. Design with flexible layouts that expand according to your string lengths. Text direction, we talked about that before with Arabic, left to right, right to left. There are some languages, old Chinese, Japanese would go from top to bottom, but even for digital assets, websites, applications, they all use 99% of them are still going to use left to right. Uh, Try to avoid any logic-based functionality in your applications or websites that are based on language or locale using if-then else statements. Offload that to the framework that you're going to use, whether it be Coldbox, whether it be a JavaScript framework. Let the resource bundles do that for you. Like I said, use some sort of library or framework. Don't try to do this from scratch. You could using database and things like that, but it's going to hurt your brain. Let the framework do the heavy lifting for you. And the most important thing too, my example with Air Premia was some of the translations were kind of sketchy. Obviously, they did not QA with native English speakers. So whatever language you're targeting, make sure that you have a native speaker go over all your resource bundles, look through your website, look through your application, make sure things are not only the strings are correct, the grammar is correct, but the cultural sensitivity part, we talked about colors and symbols and things like that. So with that, if you need to connect, if you have any questions, any comments, feel free to reach out either by email or my LinkedIn. And if you need some help or just have some questions, I'm always available. There's a GitHub there that has some of my previous CF Summit applications and code bases up there. And then my Instagram, if you look at my Instagram, there's no code. It's mostly just travel photography and my gardening pictures. So I believe the next thing we have is we have a $50 gift certificate. Is that right, Apurva?
Yes.
So I'm going to let her raffle it off.
Sure,
The
I can
lucky
do that.
winner.
Amazing. There is one question in the chat from Joy.
Okay.
So it says, do we get the same translation content each time the site loads?
Yes. Because it's accessing your resource bundle. So whatever you have in your resource bundle, it's going to be pulled in and dynamically rendered right there on your website or your application. Now, my side project for my gardening is sort of a hybrid. So I'm using Content Box, which is a CMS, again from Order Solutions. It's a module plugin for Coldbox. I'm using that just as my blog section, because my blog section is going to have different content, because culturally the climate is different in Korea than here in Southern California. Laws might be different. So my blog section is going to be two separate content. Content Box allows you to run two simultaneously blogs or sites. And there again, I'm already doing that sort of with my subdomains. So it'll pull in the blog section for each site, but I would have to create two separate blog posts, one for each language. So I'm sort of doing a hybrid, but the bulk of my website is doing the resource bundles and translations on the fly. Yeah, John says he's been using LS8 for 20 years with no issues. So yeah, Cold Fusion what's the tagline? Cold Fusion makes the hard things easy. So they take care of a lot of stuff. So if there's no other questions, I'll let Purva raffle off the gift certificate.
Yes, I'll do that.
And I want to encourage you, all of you, that if you haven't been, this has been great, the online Cold Fusion Summit, but it's a completely different experience. So I encourage all of you to come out to Vegas in the first week of June. Come out to the live summit. It's a completely different experience. It's really great. So I encourage all of you to attend.
It's going to be in the third week of June this time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Third week of June.
Yeah. 22nd and 23rd is when we'll be having it.
Okay, great.
It's raffling.
Steve's asking if there's a Dreamweaver used to have the resource bundle editor. I remember that. I don't do it in VS Code, but I've seen there is a text editor specifically for resource bundles. I would have to look it up and see what that is, but there is a couple of tools out there that make life easier for you. Or if you're using, Steve, if you're using JSON or you decide to use JSON, I think there's some JSON editors out there too that you could use.
So I did the raffle and we have Jerry P as the winner.
Jerry B, congratulations.
So if you're still here, please share me your mail ID and congratulations, Jerry.
Great.
Thank you for the wonderful session, Kevin.
Okay.
And thank you for joining us over here.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions today. And thanks again. I hope to see you all guys in Vegas, third week of June. Okay?